Well, let me do this in reverse order and see if I have enough time left over to complete my first burst, as it were. I think I gave you fair warning, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, that Dr. Lennox would have to claim to know more than he can possibly know, and he by no means let me down. He knows that he's saved. He knows who's saved him. He even knows who hung the stars in the sky. How he knows this, I don't know. It was a bravura performance in its way, but I don't think if you're going to claim to know who put the stars up there, that you should be citing Albert Einstein. If there's a copy of my portable Atheist on sale afterwards, and I hope there is, if it isn't, it is available at fine bookstores everywhere. I have several pages of painstaking denials by Albert Einstein that he had or ever had any belief at all of any sort in a personal God or a savior or a divine revelation. He was at pains to repudiate this, and he thought it was both sinister and childish as well as unscientific. The furthest he would go would be an illustration of the distinction I labored in vain to make between deism and theism, between a name you might give to a process or an order or a law of nature, and the idea of an intervening, vengeful, supervising, caring God, a personal one. That's the only distinction I hope to make, and it was one that Dr. Lennox treated as if it was non-existent, as you may have noticed. Einstein may not be used by those who believe in revelation or personal God. Now, okay, on the something and nothing question, let's stay with science for a moment. Edwin Hubble noticed a few years ago, as many of you will know, that the universe was continuing to expand and at quite a rapid rate away from itself. But it was thought by people who were still thinking in what you might call Newtonian terms, that though that rate of expansion was remarkable and rather alarming, it would obviously have to start slowing down, decelerating at a certain point. To the contrary, it has recently been discovered by a very brilliant physicist, Lawrence Krauss, that in fact the rate of expansion is increasing, and quite rapidly. The universe is expanding very, very fast. Very soon, if we hadn't been around at this particular point in time, there wouldn't be enough evidence left around in the red light shift for us to know that the Big Bang had ever even taken place. We're only picking that up from signals from a long time ago, which will soon be unintelligible. I'm saying soon, using billions of years as an index of time, of course, light years, if you will. Not light years, they're distances, but you know what I mean. Distances and times that are rightly called astronomical. What does this mean? It means that, though there is now something, after all, I am here, I do firmly believe, and I'm very happy to see all of you here too, especially those of you who paid for your tickets. It means that very soon there will be nothing. A lot of nothingness is headed our way. It's going to be all over quite soon. You can see it coming. Read the Lawrence Krauss, Edwin Hubble stuff. It's going to explode away. It's going to fall apart. And if, that is, a couple of things don't happen sooner than that, we can already see the Andromeda galaxy in the night sky. You can actually see it some nights without really the aid of a telescope, headed directly on collision course for our own. We have an appointment, ladies and gentlemen, with the Andromeda galaxy. It's going to crash right into ours. There's something now. Enjoy it while you can. Nothing is coming. Whose design is that, may I inquire? Or perhaps before that, it's very possible that before any of this happens, we won't have to worry about it, because our sun will simply swell up into a red dwarf, our oceans will boil, life on this planet will become extinct, and then the sun will collapse into itself and go the way that millions and millions and millions of other stars have. We can see them imploding and exploding and shooting themselves to death all over the sky as it is. Nothingness, there's a lot of nothingness. So those who want to claim the credit for the something, what deity is going to claim the credit for the nothingness? And who went to all this trouble, this fantastic explosion of nothingness, these infinite spaces of nothingness, and with the destiny of destruction written in every galaxy, in order to create this one privileged planet with this one very shivering, uncertain, vulnerable primate species on it that's only been here for 100,000 suffering years and has only been offered redemption for 2,000. Look first upon this picture and on that. Look at the absolute extraordinary scale that's proposed on the one hand, and the absolutely, or not even microcosmic on the other. And I don't believe you can possibly take any claim of religion seriously here. Whatever is the explanation for this, people who say, well, since we don't know, we may as well say it's God, are simply drumming their fingers. They're wasting their time and they're trying to waste yours. Now, on this question of who's boss, and why I don't think the Eternal Father idea is a good one. I'm sure I'm not the only father here. I have 3 children. My job as a father is to get out of their way, is to do my best for them and then make room for them. What if I was to say to them, oh, don't worry, I'll always be here. Not as in, I'll always be here for you, as in, I'm never going away. You'll never see the back of me. You'll never get to say goodbye, Daddy. No, I'll always be here. In fact, I'll be here long after you've died. In fact, I'm rather looking forward to that, because then I can sit in judgment on you. This is not even a benevolent form of despotism, is it? When you allow yourself to think about it. It's somewhat worse than I was saying before about the way that religion makes people first be terribly abject and then terribly solipsistic and arrogant and conceited. If it were true that all these things are attributable to an eternal Father who is unknowable except by those who claim, as Dr. Lennox does, sources of information denied to me and many other people, what would it mean at the minimum? It would mean we were living under an unalterable, unchallengeable dictatorship, which might or might not be benign. We've no assurance it would be benign. In my view, benign dictatorships are the worst, but that's another story. It would mean we were subjected to everlasting, round-the-clock surveillance, waking and sleeping. We would never have a private moment. Everything we did and thought would be known and supervised and invigilated, and either rewarded or punished. Even Big Brother in George Orwell's 1984 couldn't be absolutely sure what all his subjects were thinking, but there was the crime of thought crime. You could be charged with it under the divine dispensation, no problem. You're convicted of thought crime before you've even had the thought, because everything is knowable. And how would the God who convicted you know? Because he'd already created you full of dirt and sin and wickedness. That's part of the design. And the horror of it, the fascistic element of it, is this: you're created sick and then you're ordered to be well. So you're created full of dirty thoughts and wickedness and wrong ambitions and impure and foul nature, and then you're told, you better cure yourself pretty fast, otherwise I won't be answerable for the consequences. This is the worst imaginable kind of unfreedom, and I have to say I distrust those who wish that it were true. In my opinion, the original emancipation, the first emancipation that humans must undergo is the freeing of themselves from this man-made and mind-forged manacle. It might be asked, why don't I want it to be true? Why don't I wish it to be true? Well, I'll tell you, because once you admit that this despot exists, you will find yourself in the real world, in the here and now, subjected to the rule of man-made power, purely man-made power, ruled by other primates and other mammals who claim the right to do anything they want with you because they have God on their side and because their rule is divine. This is not a theoretical danger. I'll illustrate it in a different way if you like, and take up Dr. Lennox's point about the origins of morality. If you think that we wouldn't know right from wrong, we'd have no concept of good and evil, or the right action or the wrong action, or the right thought or the wrong thought, if we didn't have the permission of a supernatural celestial dictator, if that's where our ideas of good and evil come from, then let me ask 2 questions of you. First, okay, I'll ask the questions and I'll leave it with the questions, and I hope I'll get a response later. You must now, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe this, you must tell me of a right action performed or a right statement, moral statement made by a believer, such as Dr. Lennox, that I could not make myself or couldn't state myself, something that only he could do as a believer that was right and moral and I could not do because I'm not a believer. I've asked this question in a lot of places now and to a lot of people, including senior bishops and archbishops and others. I have not yet had an answer to it, and there must be a good answer if they are to make the claim that faith licenses morality and ethics. And then my second question, corollary question, much easier. Please think of a wicked action done by someone purely because they are a person of faith. Think of an evil thing said or an evil thing done that is only done because the person is religious. You've already thought of one. The suicide bombing community is entirely religious, faith-based. The genital mutilation community is entirely faith-based. You know how it goes. While these two questions hang in the air, I will bow out, let you brood on them. I hope you'll feed some of them back to me. And once again, my thanks, and back to Dr. Lennox.
Well now, I'll not be able to deal with all of these, but let me do my very best to talk about them. You missed completely my point about Einstein. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you noticed I didn't mention anything at all about Einstein's belief in God, because I'm completely aware of all that Christopher Hitchens had said. The point I made was that Einstein believed that all scientists had faith. That is a completely different thing, a faith in the rational intelligibility of the universe that was real faith. And my argument had nothing whatsoever to do with Einstein's belief in God. He mentioned in his initial speech that the idea of the Creator had been completely refuted by the question, you must ask who created the Creator, and you get into an infinite regress. I discussed that with Richard Dawkins in my debate in Oxford. If you have to ask the question, who created the Creator, that means you believe in a created God. And created gods are a delusion. We've known that for centuries, and we don't need to be told it. If you say who created the Creator, it means also that you cannot conceive of anything that's eternal. And I don't know what Mr. Hitchens' views on the universe are, or in mass energy, but the incapacity to believe in eternal is essentially the issue. My final point on that would be this. I said to Richard Dawkins, I can ask you the same question, because you believe that the universe created you. So I would like to know who created your Creator, but he doesn't seem to have an answer to that. Now then, you referred to the universe and its expansion and collapse from the beginning to the end. And you said, what's the point of the whole thing? I would agree with you if I believed that the universe was a permanent phenomenon. But one of the things I understand from the New Testament is that the universe never was meant to be a permanent phenomenon, but is a stepping stage. I cannot go into what the Bible has to say about the notion of new heavens and a new earth, but I would simply want to say that this is something that is very clear in the Bible itself, which claims that the universe will end up in a massive heat death. This is something not new with science. And the point is that God is going to have a new manifestation. And that is why his plans are much bigger than we see within the confines of this present universe. But there was quite a lot of emphasis in Christopher Hitchens' talk on certainty. He said those who say they are certain are discredited. But he was absolutely certain when we spoke that supernatural is to be ruled out, that no one can know the mind of God. How is he so certain about that, if you can't be certain about anything? Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is actually important, because I would not like to give you the impression that my certainty is the certainty of arrogance. It's rather this, that I believe that behind this universe there is a God who loves you and me so much that he's taken the initiative and revealed himself to us. And the key question that underlines this whole discussion is this: is there such a thing as revelation? Because then it's not a question of arrogance, it's a question simply of accepting things for which there is evidence. So I would zero in to the central claim of Christianity, which is this: that God became human, the Word became flesh. And as a scientist, I want to say that my response to that is there any evidence for it? That Jesus is whom he claimed to be. He claimed to be revealing God. And if Christopher Hitchens, for example, reveals something about himself to me, then it's not arrogance for me to believe it. But I will never know him unless he's prepared to do that. It's exactly the same with God. Unless he reveals himself to me, of course I cannot get to know him. But if he reveals himself, then that's a completely different situation. So it's got to stand or fall on the question as to whether there is any evidence for Christ's claim to be God. Because if he is God, then certainly there are some things that we can know about God for the simple reason that he has told them to us. And for me, of course, the central evidence is the fact that Jesus Christ literally rose from the dead on the third day. Now, I'm sad when I hear Christopher Hitchens' caricature of God as a celestial big brother, always watching us, trying to spoil our fun. That is an invented God, ladies and gentlemen. Because the God that I know is a God that cares for me and has created the possibility of a real relationship with me. I might as well say, who would want to be married and have a woman or a man in their home constantly watching them, constantly supervising them, constantly looking out for them? That would be absurd, because it's to take one aspect of watching over and to distort it into a universalized explanation. Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you glad that there are police in this country watching over you? Aren't you glad that there are people? Incidentally, I think Mr. Hitchens and I are enjoying the fact that you're watching us tonight. And it's not inhibiting us at all. We're enjoying it. There's a watching that's good, and there's a watching that's bad. And if you abolish God's watching, I notice that we ended up in the Orwellian situation in Eastern Europe with Big Brother watching. What did people think of that in 1989? They voted very clearly against that atheist kind of supervision. And it was in fact the Christians that led the silent revolution in Eastern Germany that knocked the wall down. There's a false kind of watching, and I agree with Mr. Hitchens on it, but there's a true kind of watching, because the relationship with God is not something that's forced. It's a real relationship of love. We've been given freedom. I heard a real caricature of the biblical story in saying that God had created us sick. God made a perfect world, ladies and gentlemen. But he made us in his image with the capacity of real freedom and real choice. So that if we say no to God, God will honor that choice. I wonder what Mr. Hitchens would want God to do with people that say no to him. He seems to have difficulty with the idea that God will honor the choice of those that say no. Why is that? Because God hates them and is some cosmic tyrant? Of course not. It's because God actually loves them. Now, these things are sometimes hard to grasp because there are so many distortions of God around in the world, and that's why, again and again, I come back to look at the person of Christ who reveals God to me, to look at his love and his friendship and his care. And if I ask myself the question, would I like to be in the company of that person permanently? My answer is a resounding yes. I can think of nothing more liberating and nothing more utterly magnificent that expresses the greatness of God. Now, we heard a challenge from Mr. Hitchens that he throws out all over the place. Can we think of a right action that can be made only by a Christian and not by an atheist? It's actually a very subtly interesting question to me, because there are certain presuppositions behind it that I'd like to briefly deal with in closing. One is this: from where I sit, ladies and gentlemen, whether a person is an atheist or a Christian or anything else, they are made in the image of God, and therefore they are moral beings. Therefore they're capable of seeing good and doing good. And sometimes my atheist friends could put me to shame. So there is that basic moral compass, which makes Mr. Hitchens' question a little bit beside the point. But if I were going to answer his question directly, I'm not convinced that William Wilberforce would have liberated slavery as he did if his motivation had been atheism. Because I noticed that Wilberforce liberated slaves only to have slavery reintroduced by Nazi Germany and communism in the 20th century. There is no guarantee, ladies and gentlemen, that the abolition of God will mean the abolition of the captivity of man. But my final answer to his question is this: can I name a good action that no atheist could do? Yes, I can. I can name one that no person of whatever worldview could do, and that is to give his life for the sins of the world. It is that characterized Jesus Christ as the one who was God, and that is unparalleled in its majesty and in its confirmation that God is truly great.